Test, test. And hey, Dare. Hey, Justin. Welcome to the stream, you guys. Casting around for something to discuss today. It's always a effort anymore to come up with something to really talk about. Hey, Jeremy. Welcome to the stream, Sergeant Tanks. I really enjoyed your breeding fish stream last night. I thought you did a great job, man. Anybody that is in the stream that doesn't know Jeremy at Sergeant Tank Pets should go check out his channel immediately. So casting around for something, and a little bit of the progenesis of this idea came from Jeremy's stream last night. I keep trying to talk about things in the hobby that affect how we keep our fish, affect how our fish survive in our tanks. And one of the things that I think it's really critical for us as fish keepers to do is to try to gain a basic understanding of what affects our fish in the wild. And to that end, I think we should spend some time going through the hydrological process, which is basically the evaporation of water on the surface into water molecules that then collect in the atmosphere into clouds and then become heavy enough to begin raining back down on the surface. And I think for us to understand the effect of rain on the water that our fish live in, that we collect from the wild or that we raise in our tanks, to understand how that rain affects those fish will aid us in understanding the various behaviors that our fish go through in the wild and then exhibit for us in some manner in the fish tank. You know, no fishes have evolved in fish tanks for so long that they affect mannerisms that come from being in a fish tank per se. I'm not saying that there aren't behaviors that are developed by a single fish in a fish tank. Justin wants to know, do I think it's warm enough in central Indiana to keep 2 angelfish outside in my pond yet? Hey, Biggies, welcome to the stream. Justin, we are going to have temperatures in the 60s this week. So I think unless you have a heater in an outside pond, that it's probably still too cold to I mean, they would probably do all right, but I still think that it is too cold in southern and central Indiana to keep angelfish outside. Angelfish are much more accustomed to 78, 79, 80, 81, and you're just not going to hold that overnight in an outdoor pond unless it's heated. So I would wager that you probably need to wait another month. You might get away with it. They might do just fine, but it's going to get a little colder than they normally like. So I really wouldn't. So to understand rain itself, We probably need to do some basic science in the hydrological process, which is, sure, Justin, that all of the water vapor, hey Lumpy Dog, welcome to the stream. All of the water vapor that goes together to form the clouds and the rain is coming from the surface, either rivers and lakes evaporating, or water evaporation from the soil, or in large part the transpiration process. Hey Victor, welcome to the stream, whereby plants exhaust water vapor to the air through their pores and their leaves. And all of this water is basically been distilled. It is evaporation, and it loses most of its salts and a lot of the biological organic stuff through this transpiration process of plants, and even in the evaporation from the soil, lakes, rivers, ponds, streams, and mostly the ocean. The sun heats the water in all these bodies of water and causes the evaporation to occur. Just as the heat of the water in our tanks and the air to water surface ratio, which is increased by turbulence and increased by wind action. If you put a fan on top of the surface of one of your tanks and let that air blow across the surface of the water, you will increase the evaporation speed of the water in your tank. All of these things are a process by where the water molecule leaves most of the heavier elements, salts, organics, in the plant or the water or the soil where it is being evaporated from, and then it in turn moves into the atmosphere and collects into clouds. And in those clouds, what occurs is this basically distilled water vapor, which becomes droplets, all form around a particle of dust or ash that's been picked up through wind and lofted into the atmosphere, and then is grabbed onto by water vapor until it begins to collect. Hey Laura, welcome to the stream. Collect enough water to actually create a droplet, which then either rains, or if the atmosphere is cold enough, or if it's over mountains, will create snow. And the snow and the rain then drop to the surface. But there's several things that we need to think about because of the rain having gone through this water vapor state. It's given off most of its heat in the process of condensing back into a water droplet. One of the things that it gives off is heat. Laura, I'm trying to talk about the effect of rain on our fish in the wild so that we can understand breeding processes, so that we can understand the kinds of things that affect our fish in the wild, and thereby maybe potentially recreate some of those instances in our fish tanks, i.e. rain, i.e. low water times. Things that fish sometimes need to kick off the breeding cycle. So let's talk about, we've got all this water vapor in the air. We've got it coalescing around a particle of dust in a cloud. We know that it has given off most of its, hey Billy Kettner, welcome to the stream. We know that it has given off a great deal of the heat that caused its evaporation to begin with, so that it could coalesce around a piece of dust and create a droplet that's heavy enough to fall out of the cloud as rain or as snow. So what we have is a droplet of water that is particularly free of salts. Hey Heather, welcome to the stream. Particularly free of salts, of organics, of minerals, heavy metals mostly are gone. And unless it's in an area where there's a great deal of industry pumping ash and particulate and sulfuric compounds into the atmosphere through the processes of industry, and in some cases all of those gases and particulates interact with this water molecule, water vapor molecule, to the point where it actually gains sulfuric compounds, which creates acid rain, or it gains ash, or it gains particulate from the industry being pumped into the air. 90% of the time, this rain molecule that we're talking about that's going to rain down onto our fish in the wild is going to be cooler than the water that's in the lake or the river or the stream or the pond. It's going to be a much less TDS than the water that's in the lake or the river or the stream or the pond. So basically we're dropping cooler distilled water that is wrapped around a particle of dust. All of this is going to come down on the lake or the river or the stream, and it's going to have an effect on our fish. Hey 54 Punchy, welcome to the stream, man. So what kind of effects is this rain going to have on the habitat of our wild fish? It is going to cool down their environment slightly, momentarily even. It is going to add that particle of dust or sand or ash or whatever it's picked up in the atmosphere to coalesce around into that system, i.e. there's going to be more dirt, more dust in that system now because of the rain hitting the water and releasing that dust. It is going to be a much lower TDS than the water that's in the lake or the river. So if it's a river that has gone through a great deal of evaporation, a great deal of dry season, and the water has gotten shallower and shallower over time as it's evaporated, then we know that all that, what makes up TDS, that has gotten more and more condensed in that water, because as the water has evaporated, it leaves all of its minerals and organics and everything in the water of the river, creating a higher TDS, higher levels of organics, potentially higher ammonia, potentially higher nitrite and nitrates. So in effect, what is happening is this distilled water droplet that has very low TDS in it is entering that stream and diluting the TDS in the water that the fish are living in. And they recognize this. They can't help but feel it. through their osmotic processes, that the water has become less salty, less, and by that I mean mineral salts, less organically loaded, and all of these things add to the fish's ability to recognize a change in season, that they are going from low water, low food, higher concentrations of TDS in their water, to a new season of rain, which will produce much more water volume, which will produce perhaps increased flow, which will produce a slightly lesser concentration in their water, and will create cooler water conditions for short periods of time, or generally, depending on the size of the body of water that these fish are in. Now, there are some caveats to this. Water that has condensed and then come down as snow in higher elevations will produce cooler streams when it melts. It will be a lot colder than the waters in rivers and lakes. And then the water that falls will not be colder than, if it rains in the mountains on one of those streams that has a lot of snow melt in it, it will actually warm that water up. So in some cases, it's not cooler than the lakes or streams where it's falling. But these are all signals to the fish that live in those environments that several things are about to happen. There's suddenly going to be a lot more water around them. It may even overflow the banks and get into areas that have heavy plant growth, which will give them access to plant material to eat that they couldn't get to before, may give them access to way more bugs in the water, because suddenly those plants that were the home to bugs are now inundated in water, flooded, and the bugs themselves fall off into the water and the fish can eat them, and they know this. This will oftentimes trigger breeding behaviors in fish. They know they're going to get fed really well. There's going to be more food than they can eat. There's going to be so much food that they can get into breeding condition, lay their eggs or drop their fry, and that there will be an abundance of food for those fry and those eggs to survive on when they hatch. So, Eric Bodrock's famous quote is, "Be the fish." So sometimes a way to understand how we might get fish to breed is to recognize this seasonal change, to recognize what the actual rain that is falling on our fish in their natural native habitat does to the water around them. Suddenly they may have floods. There may be, onslaughts of water in what was normally just a little stream. The fish all have to adapt to these kinds of changes in their environment, or they don't survive. So over the millennium, they have seen this over and over and over and over again, with obviously some changes. Year to year, it's never the same, but it's close. And so they recognize when their breeding season is going to start, because they've been through this low water season, the dry season, and then suddenly all this water and food is in their environment, they understand, hey, turtle girl, welcome to the stream. They understand fully that this is the season that is going to be most effective for them to go through their breeding behaviors and for them to release fry or lay their eggs or scatter their eggs, however each individual species does it. They know that this is when to do it. So we can take advantage of this by creating a season effect on the fish in our tank. Instead of doing our weekly 20% or 40% or 50% water change that we normally do, or our 2 weekly 50%, or however we handle our water changes, we can stop doing that water change for a little while. And in the process, allow the water to further evaporate and evaporate and evaporate in our tank so that fish experience a low water condition in their tank. Then, you've got to be careful here, because if you let the concentrations get very high in your tank, hey Corona Ken, welcome to the stream, man. If you let the concentrations of nitrite and nitrates and maybe even ammonia and the waste from fish really get heavy concentrations in the tank, and believe me, that would never occur in the wild, because there's almost always water flow. Even if it's very low, there is some water flow from natural springs and water melt from other places. You've got to be careful, because you don't want to let those concentrations get too high and then suddenly do a 70% water change on your fish, and then suddenly they're having to cope with a change of what their osmotic process has been going through, and then suddenly it is a much lower TDS, and they have to cope with that as well. Large parameter changes are very rarely ever good for our fish. So we have to do this with a certain amount of understanding of what the fish can tolerate and what the fish like. But that said, if we give our fish a 4 or 5 week dry season and then start doing 20% water changes with really good new water, and then maybe throwing some floating plants on the surface, because in the wild their water locations will suddenly have plants that are being knocked down by thunderstorms, trees fall over on the banks. Suddenly these fish are surrounded by new stuff. Plants in the water, plants on the surface, a lot of splashing and rain that is cooler and a much lower TDS than what they're currently in, and also contains some dust. All of these things are signals to the fish that it is raining, and you can coincide this with a low barometric front in your area. You can watch when rain is going to come in and time this tank rain, water suddenly splashing on the surface, plants on the surface, with the barometric front rolling in, and you have in effect created a situation that mimics the change in seasons between the dry season and the wet season in the wild. And then all you have to do is give them a great deal of good, better than flake food suddenly. Daphnia, brine shrimp, insect larvae, things that they didn't have before, and now suddenly they're getting it, and they're fattening up from eating all of this rich food. You have created exactly the breeding conditions that exist in the wild for most, not all, but for most of the fish that live in the wild and are collected and bred and kept in our aquariums. And understanding these sort of things gives you a much better opportunity to, quote, quote, be the fish, to understand what the fish is going through in the tank, to understand what the fish needs before it feels like that it's ready to breed. And rain, i.e. the wet season, is one of the best methodologies that we can use in our fish tanks to create a situation that feels like breeding time to our fish. Now, many of them have been bred in tanks, and we're no longer getting wild-caught fish. We're getting fish that have long lineages of being bred in tanks. But all of that native understanding of what they would experience in the wild has not been bred out of them yet. They still feel the need for that dry season and that wet season, and the increase in food, the increase in water, the increase in the area that they're able to colonize. Hey, honey, how was your funeral?
It was fine. It was very, very nice.
Did a lot of people show up?
Yes.
Well, that's good. The boys are outside. All right, so that's basically my rant on understanding rain, understanding how rain affects our fish in the wild, and understanding how our understanding of it can aid us in potential breeding situations where we may not be having much luck, and we need to create something that mimics the wild so that we can jumpstart our fish into breeding. Corona Ken says, live blackworms drives my Corys crazy. Must have had 400 eggs last week. Yep, heavy feeding of a rich food source can often kick off breeding. You get the females into condition, and the males go to work, and suddenly you have breeding going on in your tank. And catfish are no different than fish in the sense of how all of those things affect them. I don't think that you need to really differentiate a whole lot in the sense of using this methodology to try to increase your chances of having a successful breeding process. Black worms are something that the fish will get something similar to in the wild. Corys love to pull worms out of the substrate and eat them. That's why they're always digging around in the sand or the gravel in any place that you put them in a tank, because that's their native behavior, is to dig worms, insect larvae, insects, stuff that's fallen into the water and dropped down into the substrate. That's what they're doing. They're looking for food. I mean, they'll swim around and eat food at the surface if they have to, but they're a lot happier finding it where they expect it to be, which is in the substrate. Billy Kettner and Corona Ken are talking about whether Ken uses a tumbler to hatch his eggs, and Billy says if you don't use a tumbler, the snails eat all the eggs. Yeah, snails are pretty good at collecting and eating eggs. But my experience is that usually they eat eggs that have fungus or that were not fertilized properly or that have already passed the ability to give birth to fish. All right, so I've eaten the first half hour with my rant on rain, the hydrologic process, how all these things can tie in together. Laura says that her Corys were pretty good at eating eggs too. Yeah. 54 Punchy is waiting for Farwella eggs to hatch today. Can see the fry inside the eggs. Hey IFG, welcome to the stream, man. I haven't caught your last couple of videos yet, IFG. I've been busy doing stuff and I haven't seen what you've done with your fish, but I've caught most of your videos up until that point, and I've really been enjoying them. You seem to be branching out into a lot of different kinds of fish species now. You seem to have expanded your collection quite a bit. Turtles, plecos, tetras. IFG says, I hear that most wild fish spawn in the rain. IFG, you just missed my 30 minutes of yeah, you were talking about moving too. You care to give us more information on your move? Are you moving to a bigger house, a smaller house, a better neighborhood, a worse neighborhood? What's up with your moving, Evan, if you don't mind talking about it? Yeah, I spent about 30 minutes talking about rain. Oh, closer to the office. Less driving time. That sounds great, man. Are you going to set up an official fish room in the house? An hour away. So you're spending about 3 hours of your day every day commuting to and from work. That sucks, man. And if traffic's bad, it could turn into 4 hours. Well, I'm happy for you that you're getting closer to your work, man. Are you going to make a dedicated fish room? Yes to the fish room. Awesome. I'm looking forward to that, man. I know the garage functioned for you, but I'll be happier to see it all in an actual fish room inside the house. You'll have a little better control of the temperature and stuff like that. Two ponds in the yard. You mean they're already there, huh? Awesome. Do they have fish in them? Corona says that he's been using two methods to either cut the leaves or scrape the eggs off the glass. This is for his Corydoras. And then he puts them in a breeder basket. Instead of using a tumbler, he puts them in a breeder basket with an air stone. Awesome, Evan. I'm looking forward to those videos. And Corona Ken says he's been experimenting with picking out infertile eggs and either methyl blue or chlorinated tap water to ward off fungus. Boy, I would hesitate on chlorinated tap water to ward off fungus. I just think that all that chlorine would affect the eggs themselves. But I guess you're going to see what the hatch turnout is after using chlorinated tap water to ward off fungus. I know a lot of people use those little collection bins, and set them in the tank so that the temperature is the same. And then they put a little bit of something to cycle the water. Evan, I didn't catch what was wrong with Corey. I caught a little bit of Fish Fam Mom Susan's doing a prayer circle for him, but I don't know exactly what it is. He must have picked up some kind of bug or, a flu or something while he was in Germany. That's what I heard. And that's what's got him under the weather. I have no idea. I can't really tell. I don't know. Maybe someone else has been following him on Facebook. Corvus is sick too, huh? Man, those guys are going to have to stop French kissing, huh? I guess they both picked up the bug in the same place. Yeah, I wish them the best in their healing process and getting over it. Sometimes bugs from other parts of the world, we're not exposed to them so much in the U.S. or not exposed to that particular kind, and so sometimes they can hit you really hard. You've not built up an immunity to those things, and you can get hit really hard by stuff like that. I hope my prayers go out to he and Corvus, and I hope that they get better soon. But I've not followed closely enough to know exactly what it is, if they've even said. They may have said on Facebook or Twitter or something where I've just not been following along. It can become a full-time job just following everyone's channels. I want this to be fun. I want this to be a pleasurable thing that I do, that I broadcast, that I post videos on YouTube. And sometimes it's overwhelming to try to keep up with everything that's going on YouTube. There's just so much. So sometimes I slack off in certain areas, and here lately I've been watching basketball. The NBA season is winding down to a close. My Pacers got beat out of it. So I'm starting to spend a little more time on YouTube, and I try my best to support the people that I know, to support the people that I like, to support the people that I follow. And that's not denigration on anyone. It's just a matter of only having the time to do so many things, and really realistically having to pick and choose what you spend your time doing. So Corey has hundreds of thousands of followers, and Corvus is gaining that many too, and my not following every move they make is not going to affect their bottom line very much. So I don't spend as much time watching Corey and Corvus as I did. I think that they're both off the ground and in the air, and one more view or less is not going to really hurt their bottom line a bit. So I've chosen to follow people that are that come to the time I spend on my live streams. Those are people that are definitely going to get my attention and who I am going to follow because I feel a closer relationship with them. Now, I know a lot of people prefer to watch a live stream later in the week or when they have time to watch it, and that's all well and good too. My talking about this is just my explanation for why I haven't been Johnny on the spot understanding exactly what's going on with Corey. I've picked it up. I've heard about it. I've picked up what little I could glean from the people that I've watched. And, you know, I'm sorry that they're going through this, and I hope they feel better. But I'm just not sure that that's my time, I think, is better spent supporting channels with smaller followings, supporting people that I know that are doing good in the hobby and that don't have this massive TV, you know, YouTube presence, web presence that people like Corvus and Corey have already, you know. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't watch them when I find the time. I do. I've watched several of Corey's in China videos looking at the fish that they had on display and all those tropical fish meccas that they have in China where they stick all of the same thing in the same place. So every tropical fish store in a city in China is right. Yeah. Yeah, Billy, I hope they get better. I'm happy for them that they got to do the traveling. I'm slightly jealous, but you know, I hope that they get better. That's my point here. Not that I'm trying to say anything exactly. They're big. Corvus and Corey are big news. So they don't need my watches on their channels. They've got tons of people watching. When they put out something that I'm very interested in, or if I've got the time, I will watch them. But I'm not such a presence there anymore. I used to be because I was mod on Corey's channel, and I felt the burden of being a mod that I need to be there to kick trolls and to help people with URLs to places that they needed to get to. But he's got so many mods now. Me as a mod not being there is not going to hurt Corey's channels at all. I love Jimmy, I love Corey, I love Corvus. That's not anything to do with what I'm talking about. I'd much rather lend my support to a channel that has 25 followers and 3 viewers on a live stream that really needs the support, that can really benefit from the support. And that's what I try to do. I try to help people that I know are doing good work, that are in the fish fam, that are needing support in their channels, and I try to go and support. And I also try to help channels that are really doing good. Hey Priscilla, welcome to the stream. Oh no, I'm running errands and ran out of data. Hitting the like button and hope you all have a good weekend. Priscilla, right back at you, girl. I hope you have a good weekend too. Your artwork is becoming more and more amazing. Those frogs you're doing are just incredible. Anybody that doesn't know Priscilla's artwork that's in here needs to go check out Priscilla MK Art. All of the logos, my avatar, are all creations of Priscilla's work. I made her craft me a squirrely L260 catfish with teeth in its mouth, smiling. And I know it was difficult for her. I got several variations of what the mouth was going to look like as she got closer and closer to deciding. Coronakin is posting some links to the Catfish Con, early October 2018. Laura says, I like how intimate the smaller channels are also because of the large following for Corey and the larger channels. Unless you send a super chat, you'd be lucky to get your comment seen. And that's very true. That's the downside of becoming so famous and big that thousands of people are commenting every second, you know. If you've ever been on one of Joey's live streams, the chat just flies past so fast you can't even really see it. Turtle Girl says, also I hate it when my wireless mouse dies. Then I have to charge it and can't do anything. Yeah, wireless mouses can be a problem. I've actually gone back to wired mouse. I went with a battery powered mouse for a long time, but the batteries get eaten up so quickly that you're basically just changing batteries, and batteries have gotten really expensive. And I've used wireless and had trouble with them, so basically I've just gone back to a wireless mouse. As long as you get your wires trained properly, it's not a problem. So what's going on with you guys? We've talked about Corona Ken's Corey Catfish, and he's posted Catfish Convention in Virginia in early October. I will sadly not be making that. I have not made a Catfish Con in probably 10 years, and I really, really miss going to catfish conventions. But I have done the Ohio Cichlid Association extravaganza 2 years ago. I did Aquatic Experience last year, and this year I'm going to Peru and spending probably as much money as I've ever spent in the fish keeping hobby to do that. And that's pretty much going to shoot down me doing a lot of traveling and a lot of fish conferencing for quite a while. It's probably going to take 4 or 5 years before I feel like I'm going to do anything that's not real close by. Now, I know that the Live Bearer conference is supposed to be in Louisville next year. I heard that on some of Lucas's and Corey and Corvus and all of them talking at I guess it was one of Lucas's streams that I caught, and that it's going to be in Louisville next year. And I live right across the river from Louisville in Indiana, so I will definitely try to make that. Billy says he's been breeding shrimp in 10-gallon and 20 longs. The 20 longs seem to breed way better. Is that anyone else's experience? I think, Billy, I am no expert on shrimp, but I have been keeping them for about a year now. I got mine from Lucas Brett's, and I would highly recommend checking his out if you haven't, checking his channel out. I think the cutoff is probably 40 gallons in the sense that the area becomes so large that the shrimp are in, that the males have trouble finding the females. And so the 10-gallon, it's probably the amount of water that they're in. Now, I've got a ton of shrimp in a 13-gallon rimless, and they love it. Corona says, I'll be driving to Virginia, so it won't be too expensive, but I will have to sit on my hands during the auction. Corona Kim, that's not my experience. My experience is you see something in there that you have got to have. It's not a matter of, oh, I'm going to sit on it, my hands. It's, okay, what bill isn't going to get paid so I can buy these? Billy says he has many plants and critters from Lucas. Well, I think that the 10-gallon, and I've got a couple of 10 gallons that I'm going to try to set up just for shrimp breeding, to cull ones out of my other 2 tanks and try to see if I can get a line going or see what I can get them to throw. I think the 5 and 10 gallons are small enough that it may be a water quality issue with them if you don't watch it real closely, and that the 20 gallon is the happy medium between the 10 and the 40, because it's enough area for the water to be in good condition all of the time without a lot of, on the spot maintenance. Excuse me. But when you get to a 40 or a 55 or a 75 gallon tank, suddenly, unless that tank is heavily stocked with shrimp, I'm talking, you put 200 of them in there to begin with, the distance that a male shrimp is going to have to swim around the tank looking for a female is going to be so great that a lot of times the females won't get fertilized. 54 Punchy says, I pull the clutch of Farewella eggs and have a 5-gallon tank set up to hopefully raise them yesterday. This is a second clutch of eggs